Hi, everyone. My name is Roishetta Ozane. I am the founder, director, and CEO of the Vessel Project of Louisiana. I'm also the Gulf Fossil Finance Coordinator for Texas Campaign for the Environment. I live in Southwest Louisiana in a town called Sulphur. In my community, I have more than 12 petrochemical facilities. There are three LNG facilities that are currently operating in Southwest Louisiana, and there are two that have been approved for Southwest Louisiana. Southwest Louisiana is the new Cancer Alley. We have been living with these petrochemical and LNG facilities for many years. We have some community members who have been fighting more than 30 years because of the pollution in their communities. There's a small community called Mossville that's predominantly Black, where citizens are living with a facility called Sasol. But even before Sasol came, there were other facilities that came in or near that community. ConocoPhillips, Phillips 66 has come and have polluted the air, polluted the water there. So folks experience everything from bad smells such as rotten eggs or high chemical smells, chlorine smells. They experience excessive flaring all the time, which is the fire that you see coming in the sky from those facilities. They see that all the time. Smoke, just pollution in general. There have been several advisories that have been issued in and around our community, such as a fish eating advisory. We can only eat 2 pounds or less of the fish that are in the estuaries that surround the facilities. We cannot eat the fat from the crabs. If you're a fisherman or if you are a family who survives off of the natural resources provided for you, that takes away from you being able to provide for yourself and your family. Myself, as a single mom of six, having two teenage boys who love to go fishing and crabbing all the time, that is very distraught for me because whereas in the Delta of Mississippi, where I'm originally from, we could go and catch fish and have enough fish to feed the family for a month. Now we have to be wary of how much fish we eat here in Southwest Louisiana. Same thing with the crab. We love crabs. We love to eat crabs boiled, steamed, crab stew, gumbo, but we have to be cautious of how much of that crab and crab fat we're consuming because the waterways have been poisoned so much. Also, living in and around these facilities, we have had several explosions to happen. Just in this year alone, we've had two major either chemical releases or explosions from Westlake Chemical and from Biolab. Biolab had a chemical release a couple of months ago, and they released an excessive amount of chlorine. It was very strong. People were complaining of their noses burning, their eyes burning, headaches, sinus issues. Some people reported feeling like they were going to faint or pass out. There was a shelter in place issued. What a shelter in place means is that you have to get in your house, you have to close and seal all of your doors and your windows, you have to turn off your air conditioning. Now, just imagine living in Southern Louisiana and being told to turn off your air conditioner so that the fumes and that pollution doesn't come in through your air vents and through the air ducts. So that's what we experienced for almost a whole day with just that chemical release from Biolab. And what Biolab produces is chlorine tabs that supplies the nation with the chlorine tablets for their swimming pools. So if you've been wondering why lately your swimming pool chlorine tablets have been so expensive, is because the facility right here in my community has had several explosions in the last few years. And every time this happens, the price of the chlorine tablets go up. Another explosion that we just had 2 weeks ago was from Calcasieu refinery. And what happened there is we had a really bad thunderstorm. Lightning struck one of the tanks that was filled with naphtha. Naphtha is a very high contaminant. It's combustible and it's also dangerous when it's inhaled or when you get it on your skin. It can cause all sorts of things when you're exposed to it. Well, that explosion happened on a Saturday, and we were in shelter in place mode for again almost 24 hours. And the folks who live really close to that facility were asked to evacuate. Now, the issue we had with that facility in particular is that it is very close to a wealthy white community. And even though myself, I live within the 5 mile radius that was asked to shelter in place and evacuate, I don't live within that 1 mile radius that their wealthy white community lives in. They were actually bussed out and taken to a shelter, whereas lower income, poor Black, Indigenous people of color were left on their own to figure out how to evacuate and how to shelter in place during this disaster, during this man-made disaster that was caused by one of these industries that's overburdening our community. That right there was a clear picture, a clear sign of how environmental racism and environmental injustices work. The folks who are most impacted by these facilities, who are most overburdened by these facilities, contribute the least to climate change, but yet are the last ones to get any reprieve, any help, any assistance. Those low-income Black, Indigenous people of color were not bussed out. They were left on their own to figure it out. And that is unfair. And so that's one of the things that I fight for every day. And I try to highlight in these environmental justice communities, though everyone experiencing the effects and the impacts of these facilities being in and around our communities, everyone does not experience those impacts on the same level. It is not a level playing field. And so when you come to Southwest Louisiana, what you'll notice is that in particular, Lake Charles is very much racially divided. The wealthier, whiter folks live on one side of town where there are plenty of resources, several banks, several stores, hospitals, several options for getting fresh produce and fresh foods. But then when you come to North Lake Charles, it's predominantly Black, very low income, low resources, very little access to public transportation, not many green spaces, a lot of concrete. We hear these stories over and over and over, but yet that's the side of the community that's feeling the impact the most from these facilities that surround our community. And so this is something that we are fighting against here in Southwest Louisiana. We just held an energy roadshow with the Department of Energy. It was called Energy Justice to the People. We were able to get the Department of Energy here. HUD came, the EPA came out, and we took them on a tour so they could see just how unjust it is living with all of these facilities surrounding us, but also so that they could see that this is a community that's still very much in recovery mode from all of the storms that we have seen in the last few years. Just in the last 3 years, we have been faced with Hurricanes Laura, Hurricane Delta. We had Winter Storm Uri. We had a massive flood that flooded almost the entire city back in 2021. And there have been other just rain events and tornadoes that have happened that people are still recovering from. Now, you may say things like, well, we can't prevent these storms from coming. And that is correct. We live on the Gulf Coast. We live near water. We know that hurricanes will happen. We know that tornadoes will happen. We know that it will rain. The issue is that because of all of the polluting industry that we have, because of all the fossil fuel extractive industry that we have, these storms are coming more frequent, and they are also being more detrimental. And that is because the facilities that we have are being built on our natural storm surge protection. So the wetlands that surround Southwest Louisiana and that are surrounding Louisiana as a whole and are all along the Gulf Coast, those wetlands were put there naturally to break up the storms that come in the water. It's called wetlands because it's just that. It's land and water mixed together in a way that can break up those massive storms. When you constantly build man-made structures on that natural storm surge protection, on those natural wetlands, that stops the storm from being broken up in the water and causes it to come further inland. The further it can come inland, the more damage it can do. The more damage it does, the longer it takes for recovery. And this is what we say when we're talking about how these fossil fuel extractive industries are leading in climate change. They are leading in the destruction of our land. They are leading in the destruction of our wetlands. They are leading in our Gulf coastline diminishing. And so when we're talking about the more facilities that come here, you may hear us say things like, we're worried about the storms, in particular the hurricanes here, but it's way bigger than that. When those hurricanes come, they cause people to leave the community. Folks leave and sometimes they can't come back. So you're talking about the loss of families. You're talking about generations of people being broken up and separated. You're talking about the loss of stories and culture. So it's way bigger than just stopping a facility from coming. It's way bigger than when folks say we don't want jobs to come, we don't want economic development, we don't want growth. We want to keep our history and our heritage. We want to keep our families together. We want to make sure that folks are living in an area where they can thrive, where they aren't constantly threatened by massive destruction because of man-made structures that are being put in their communities. We want to make sure that folks aren't having to battle cancer that's caused by these pollutants and these emissions that are coming from these facilities. Our children have higher rates of asthma and cancer than ever before. Again, as a mom of 6, out of 6 children, I have 3 children who have a skin condition called eczema. I have 2 children who have asthma and breathing conditions. This is not normal for my family. I never had asthma. I don't have eczema. I'm the oldest of 5. None of my brothers and sisters have these conditions. My mom and her 5 siblings didn't have it, but we all grew up in the Mississippi Delta. We were not surrounded by these industries. So what changed in my children's lives is that I moved to Southwest Louisiana 20 years ago, and this is where I'm raising them. And so because they're living in and around these facilities, they are experiencing more health problems than I did as a child. I have a son who is now taking high blood pressure medication and who had a seizure while he was driving a few weeks ago, had never had a seizure before. We don't have a seizure disorder in my family. They still have not figured out why my 17-year-old son had a seizure. But the place where he was when he had the seizure, he had Phillips 66 to his right, he had Biolab to his left, and Westlake Chemical right ahead of him. He was in the midst of industry when he had the seizure. There was a large flare going when he had the seizure. There was a smell of rotten eggs in the air when he had the seizure. But the problem is they bring these facilities into our community and they don't equip us with people like toxicologists. When my son was picked up from that ditch after wrecking, after having a seizure, he was transported by ambulance to the local hospital. He was then airlifted to a hospital an hour away. He was put on life support. He had 5 seizures while he was there in the area. And once he got to that hospital an hour away, he didn't have another seizure. They still cannot find or determine what caused it. I'm no scientist. I'm just a mom who is fighting for environmental protection. And I am not blind to understand that the industries here, the flaring here, the emissions and the pollutions here had something to do with my son having a seizure. They didn't find any other issues with him. He is a 17-year-old strong, healthy boy who fishes every day. He likes to ride horses. He's played football since he was 4 years old. Never had any health problems, never had any surgeries, never stayed in the hospital before. In fact, had never been in a plane before. And he's now saying, you know, my first plane ride, I was on life support and I don't even remember. You know, and I'm thankful that he's alive and well and remembers. but that's something he should have never had to experience. It's something as a mom I shouldn't have had to experience. But it makes me wonder if I am doing my children an injustice by staying in this community. At the same time, I know that we shouldn't have to leave. The facilities that are coming here killing us, they should be made to leave. They should be made to, at minimum, pay more taxes, to pay for people's health insurance. There should be toxicologists provided here. We should have all of the best technologies in the world, and that's not the case. When you come to Southwest Louisiana, it looks like you're coming to a developing country. We don't have the best roads. We don't have the best schools. In fact, we have the lowest minimum wage in the nation. Not only do we have the lowest minimum wage in the nation, we are the #1 city in the state of Louisiana for recipients of food stamps. We are number 11 in the nation for receiving food stamp benefits. So if these facilities are bringing economic advancements and economic development and workforce development, why are people here so poor? Why are homes still looking like a hurricane hit yesterday when it hit 3 years ago? Why are roads not safe to drive on? Why do we have a bridge that is an interstate bridge that traffic flows on all day, every day? That bridge is more than 30 years past the date it was supposed to be reconstructed. But yet we're surrounded by billion-dollar industries. And what they're doing here in our community doesn't benefit us. Not just not benefiting us with jobs or economic development. The products that they're producing here is not for us. They are extracting here and exporting it somewhere else. We aren't even import facilities. What's being done and made here is going to someone else, to other countries. These facilities that are here are owned by other countries. So they are extracting our natural resources and they are sending them abroad. They're extracting our money and they're sending it abroad. What are we gaining besides dead bodies? What are we gaining besides our cancer rates going up? Besides the number of infant deaths going up? Besides the number of children with asthma going up? We aren't gaining anything. And I always say this in my personal life: if it's not benefiting me, I don't need it. So what do we need this industry for? There are other alternatives to energy. We need to be looking at a just transition, renewables, things that are lasting and sustainable, things that won't run out. We know that fossil fuels will run out one day. They are diminishing. The oil and gas industry is losing money now. We need to be turning the hands of time and doing something better, not just for the communities, but for the people. It's time that we put people before profit. It's time that we see policy change. And it's time that we understand that the reason why we are in this situation that we are in has everything to do with race and the fact that for so long, low-income, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities have gotten the short end of the stick. And I always say, if you are impacted the most, you are one of two things. You're either low income or you're a Black, Indigenous person of color, or you might be both. Because we can't neglect the fact that low-income whites also feel this. But the reason why it's now spilling over into wealthier, whiter communities is because the Black, Indigenous, people of color communities are so overburdened and there's nowhere else for it to go. And honestly, because it's now spilling over into wealthier, whiter communities, is the reason why we're having these conversations more often. Other people are starting to feel the burden that we have been feeling for so long. It's time for a change. And until we can get our elected officials to see and understand that people are more important than the money that they're getting from these oil and gas companies, we will stay in this situation forever. We have to come together. We have to work together. We have to build coalitions. We have to show how all of our fights are connected. And I'll end by saying, you cannot separate water. Water evaporates. When you think about the life cycle of water and how it evaporates and the clouds fill up and then it rains down, where is that rain going? Where are those clouds going? Who's getting that rain? Where did that rain come from? We are all experiencing this issue that's going on. We are all feeling the impacts of climate change. So we need to be working together in order to stop this massive build out that's on the horizon and hold these fossil fuel extractive industries accountable. If I was to go out there and murder someone the way that these industries are murdering people every day, I would be held accountable. I would have to give an account for that. Why aren't they being made to pay?